Hello everyone, and welcome to another astro art piece, I guess, because this is all about Venus in Pisces. And the prompt for me was Venus in Pisces, and then the person that wanted this elaborated somewhat and said that they wanted something which was really romantic and like true love at all cost and things like that. And when I think of those things, I think of Victoriana, because there was a lot of romance and romantic ideals and looking towards the past, particularly Arthurian mythos, and knights and chivalry and all of that. And our modern idea of what knights and stuff were like actually comes from the Victorian age. And they're kind of like retellings and reinterpretations of those things, and like the Pre-Raphaelites, which slightly preceded that, but that whole kind of everything's big and romantic and romanticised and dreamy, and yeah, that's kind of where my mind went with that. And as you can see, obviously this is not quite what a Victorian would produce, because I've taken some inspiration from elsewhere in the world, which I'll point out when we get there. But fundamentally this is inspired by crazy quilts. However, as you can see, it's in a hoop and therefore not quilted. However, it is pieced and taken lots of upholstery fabrics and velvets and linens and heavier fabric. There is some cotton in here, which is what a crazy quilt would have been made of, because they really like to use up scraps of wools and brocades and damasks and things like that in their crazy quilts, and then really heavily embroider and embellish them, which is why I really like them, because I love embellishments. So yeah, it's kind of like the reason I constructed that. And the reason it's in a hoop is I just couldn't get the idea of a circular composition out of my head, and it's obviously a lot easier to do a circle in a hoop. So that's that. So this fabric with the flowers on is upholstery fabric, and then I've got some vintage kind of plain cotton, and this has been a cantha stitch, which I use because when you kind of layer up layers of old cloth and stitch them together, I'm not sure which part of India, so forgive me, but off the top of my head, but the whole idea of cantha and stitching layers of old cloth together is that it protects the bearer, and I thought that whole like lovers at all costs kind of thing speaks a lot about protection, so that's why I used this repeated motif of cantha stitching and using pieces of old cloth. Some of this is table linen, but some of it is shirting. That's come literally off of old shirts. And forgive me, I'm just going to sneeze. This is... oh, there's little pieces of cross stitch running through the whole piece. This is an old ribbon, which I just stitched down with a running stitch and put sequins and vintage pearl beads. This is slightly more modern, the dangles on, but it's all reclaimed fabric, and this has a lovely little flower design. This is, you can see where I've repaired it. This is part of very old linen. And then scraps of velvet, tiny little butterfly, which, because this was intended for use as a magical talisman, I like to include the butterfly, or a symbol of change, because it's bringing change in. This is part of a vintage doily, and then vintage glass beads, and then sequins, and they're applied with little threes on. This stitching here is just basic running stitch, it's not a fancy stitch, but I'm just kind of describing the patches of different colour on the flowers and the leaves which is really helpful because this fabric is quite old, and the lighter parts of this yellow part of it, it's a pansy, I think, I'm not up on my flowers, but the very lighter parts have basically disappeared, and you really had to put your eye dead close to be able to see. But by like describing it with embroidery, you can now see the shape of the flower again. And this is some more of that shirting. The pink stripes are shirting, this green one is shirting, both from old shirts, and then some more of this crochet table linen, I'm pretty sure. And then another piece of that doily. It was intended for use on top of a vanity or on top of a dresser, which is why I chose it for this piece, because of Venus's links with beauty. I've forgotten what the technical name for it is. That's where it was intended to be used, and these beads are all off of old jewellery. This is just off a round doily. This is very old. And more of the beads. Oh, that's a fancy shot. And sequins and more beads, because this is what I think about when I think romance, just more and more and more cross stitch, some more cantha stitch. This is a large piece of that tablecloth, and I've again described the patterning inside of it. Little pink bits inside of the petals and the green around it, and little cross stitch there where they join, and then a little cantha heart just kind of stitched down there, and then at the top signed little ribbon, which can be, I've not glued that down because it can be removed depending on how the person it's for is intending to hang it, or if they're intending to hang it at all and not just like bounce it. Because if it's for an altar piece, you can just bounce it against the wall or shelf or wherever your altar is on. And yep, it's been consecrated to Venus. It has its... and if anyone wants to know how you can enchant a fabric piece, because obviously you don't want to get smoke either from candles or from incense anywhere near it, because then it's just going to stink. If it has a hoop part of it, you can just rub a little bit of oil into the hoop itself. And the small bit of essential oil that I used, it hasn't stained or warped the wood in any way. So, yeah, this is the piece. I hope the person it's for enjoys it very much. I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said in the end of the last video, I do take commissions. And I do projects as readings. So if you'd like any kind of astro art or any kind of intuitive art, please let me know.